A viewer once accused me of making cookie cutter guitars. Watch this video and tell me what you think. Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars and you're watching another one of my YouTube guitar building videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I hope that by the end of this video, I'll have earned your subscription. In today's video, I'm going to pick up where I left off in the last episode, where I was making the nut, and my plan is to finish the nut. Although, as you will see, this whole project is going to go a little bit sideways later on in this video, so be sure to check that out. At any rate, what I need to do first is I need to adjust the string action, and I'm going to measure it at the 12th fret. Sometimes I measure at the 12th fret, sometimes I measure at the 17th fret. The difference is because when I'm actually building the guitar, I'll measure at the 12th fret because I don't have to do anything else. It's a simple measurement to take. But later on, when I'm setting up the guitar after it's completely finished, I'll put a capo at the 1st fret and then measure the string action at the 17th fret because I get a more accurate picture. But for now, I'll measure at the 12th fret. And what I want to do is I want to get that action set fairly close to what it would be in the end. That way I can come back to the nut and finalize the depth of the slots to get the string action correct over the 1st fret. So it's kind of a series of steps, and what you do at the nut affects the action, and what you do at the action affects the nut. And I have to work between the two to get to where I have the right kind of string action. Now, when I say string action, it's important to understand I'm not building guitars for myself or a specific individual. Sometimes I do, but not very often. I'm building for whoever wants to buy the guitar. And at this stage, I don't know who that person is going to be, and I don't know what their preference is for string action. So for me, I have to make sure that the guitar is going to have a maximum range of string action adjustability from really low to really high. That's the goal here. So it's a little bit different than a lot of other folks who are trying to nail a specific string action. I have to make sure it can be fully adjusted. So what I will typically do is I will start by lowering the high E and low E saddles on the bridge as low as they can go. Then the other bridges are adjusted to match the radius of the fretboard. Then I'll string up the guitar, and what I'm hoping for is that the strings will be really close to the frets. Not quite touching, but really close. That way I can raise that action to get, low action or high action. And then I can proceed with getting the final depth on my nuts, on the slots in the nut. Once the guitar was strung up, I was able to measure the action at the 12th fret using my LMI digital string action gauge. And this is where things started to go sideways. This is actually the first of 2 issues that I ran into during the making of this video. The second one I'll explain later on, and it's a doozy. But anyways, what I discovered was that even with the saddles adjusted as low as they can go, and the fact that the bridges are recessed into the body, these strings were way too high off the tops of the frets at the 12th fret. I didn't have the action low enough to where I could get that full range of adjustability. So I had to stop and think, well, how can I fix this? Now, typically what that means is the neck is installed too deep into the body. So the bridges are already recessed, so I can't do that. The saddles are as low as they can go, so they can't go any lower. So I either have to raise the neck up out of the body somehow or angle the neck. And you can raise a neck up by using shims, but I really hate to shim a neck. I just think it's cheap, and that's as far as I'll go with that. But I can angle the neck, and to do that I'm going to use a technique that I've used before, and I call this whole process neck fitting. Although there may be other terms that other folks use. I don't think there's an official term for it. But I call it neck fitting, and it's a way to modify the neck installation in order to get the strings down where they need to be for the guitar to be adjustable. So that's kind of where we're going to go from here. Is I'm going to take you through my process of fitting the neck in order to get that string action at the good starting point that I want it to be at. It's important to understand that this guitar is not a production guitar by any means. It's a one-off custom prototype. I've never built this design before, nor have I used these components. So whenever I'm in a situation like that, things are always bound to go a little bit sideways. But hopefully, whatever problems I encounter can be rectified in a manner that nobody would ever even know. The first thing I've got to do is remove the strings and the neck, and as you can see, I've got some blue painter's tape on the back of the neck to protect it for the next steps. Okay, so there is a trick for sanding this surface to generate an angle which will either raise or lower the nut in order to get the best possible action. This surface has to be absolutely flat. However, it's got to be flat at an angle, whether that angle is dipping towards the headstock or towards the back. If it's dipping towards the headstock, you're going to be lowering the action of the strings. If the angle is towards the bridge or towards the heel, the end of the heel of the neck, then what you're doing is you're raising the nut and lifting the strings off higher. So the way you do it is you have to look at your sanding block, and you need to understand that the majority of the sanding action is happening across the center, with less at this end and less at this end. So you want to place that sanding block right where you need to remove the most material. So let's say I wanted to raise the nut to increase my string action a little bit. What I would do is I'd place that center area over the back edge so that I'm reducing this area. And then, because the sanding block is only covering this much of this narrow strip here, this side is not getting as much action. This is getting at least double that action. So it's going to create that downward ramp. And that's the trick. And then typically I like to use a larger block like this one here because it covers the entire surface. And that's what I'm going to be using. But if you don't have a block that big, if all you have is a smaller block, what you would do is, as you're sanding, you're going to be generating a line of sanding dust across this area, which is at the extent of where the end of the sanding block stops before you pull back. That line of sanding dust needs to be equal in volume all the way across. If you've got more at this end than you do this end, or vice versa, it's not going to be sanding consistently. So if you had more at this end, there's going to be more removed from this part of the heel than at this part. So you just want to make sure that as you're generating that sanding dust, you're generating a consistent amount right across there. But I'm going to use the larger sanding block because it covers the entire surface. And that's really the trick to getting an angle that's consistent. Unfortunately, it's the sort of thing that takes quite a bit of experience and practice to get it right. But I encourage you to try it, because once you've mastered the skill and understand how it works, you will never have an issue with the neck pocket being too deep or too shallow, or the neck angle being off, because you can correct it very easily. The safest way to do this process is just a little bit at a time. Sand a little, stop and check to make sure that the surface is absolutely flat with the machinist square. Then reinstall the neck, restring the guitar, and check that action again to see if you're getting close. You don't want to try to nail it in one shot because there's always the risk of going too far. It's better to creep up on it, and that means oftentimes having to remove and sand and then reinstall the neck multiple times before you get it where you need it to be. As I was going through the process of fitting the neck, I ran into another issue. And that is, in my opinion, with these individual solo bridges, headless bridges, I think it's best to go with the flattest fretboard radius that you're willing to go with. And really what I would recommend is 16 inches or 20 inches. Anything below that, which is more rounded, is going to cause problems. And the reason is the saddles don't have enough range of height adjustability. It's very minimal. As a result, with a tighter radius like this 12-inch radius, what works well for the high E and the low E string isn't going to work well for the D or the G string, and vice versa. If I get the action just right for the D and the G string, I can't get it for the high E and the low E string. So I had to compromise, and what I ended up with is action that works well for the D and the G string, but for the high E and the low E, it's pretty well set. In its lowest position, it's at about 5/64 of an inch, which I think is good action. You could raise the saddles to increase the action, but you can't lower them to get even lower action. So that's where you're kind of stuck with. So if you're considering this type of headless bridge design for your guitar, I would stress that you go with a 16 or 20 inch radius to avoid that problem and to ensure that you have maximum string height adjustability. It took a while to get just the right angle for the neck in order to get the string action that I want. And since I can't really adjust the string action the way I would like to with this particular bridge design coupled with this 12-inch radius, what that means is whoever plays this guitar down the road, if they want to change the action, they would either have to remove and sand the heel to a different angle, or they would have to shim it either at the front of the heel or the back of the heel to either raise or lower the nut in order to get the string action exactly where they want. Not exactly ideal, but in this prototype design with this bridge, the action is playable. It's around 5/64 of an inch all the way across, so I don't think that's really much of an issue. But I do know there are a lot of players out there who are super picky about their string action. So those guys would probably find this particular design not to be as appealing as one that has more adjustability. But I really think to get that would require a flatter radius for the fretboard. With that out of the way, I was ready to get back to finishing the nut. So the first thing I did was I glued the nut into the slot using some Titebond wood glue. After that dried, I was able to check the action at the first fret and then begin lowering or deepening the slots with my fret files in order to bring that action over the first fret down as low as possible. At this stage, the nut is too tall, so I grabbed some sandpaper and began sanding the height of the nut down so that when the wound strings are installed in the slots, the top half of the string is exposed and the bottom half is down in the slot. With the plain strings, that's not quite as important, but I think aesthetically it looks better when the nut is sanded down to a lower profile. Okay, hold the phone. Houston, we've got a problem. As it turns out, there is an issue with this guitar, and it's a problem that I kind of knew was a potential issue before I even started the build, but I decided to keep forging ahead to see if I could make it work. And what that problem is relates to the string retainers on the headstock. As it turns out, they work really well to hold wound strings, but they don't work very well holding plain strings. And I knew that from reviews that other guys had left with this design. And I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and order it and I'll see if I can make it work, because I had a few ideas. But as it turns out, no matter what I have tried, nothing has worked. The retainers just don't hold the plain strings. And as you tighten the set screw and start to tune the string at the bridge, it slips, and there's really nothing you can do to stop it. Now I know some of you are going to say, oh, why don't you just flip the retainers around and install the string with the ball at this end? It doesn't matter, because the set screw at the bridge is the same size. So you flip that around and install the strings that way. As soon as I start to tune it, the strings will slip at the bridge. Doesn't matter. The fact is this design just doesn't work for holding plain strings. As a result, I had to come up with something different. And what I've decided I'm going to try to do is I'm going to remove these retainers, and where the holes were drilled to mount the retainers, I'm going to drill a hole all the way through the headstock, and I'm going to fit it with, these are top string through ferrules. These are normally installed behind like a tune-o-matic bridge. Instead of using a stop tailpiece, you drill holes all the way through the body of the guitar, and then you'd use these top string ferrules on the top of the guitar, then you'd use larger ones on the back. And that's what holds the ball of the string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install these on the top, and I'll probably install some on the back as well. And then what I'll do is I'll just run the string through that hole and out the back side. And the way I'm going to hold it in place is I'm going to use this string retainer. This is from Geiger, and they have different sizes. This one's for 6 strings. I think they have 7 and 8 string. But the nice thing about it is the set screws are much larger than the ones that are in the string retainers that I'm currently using on the headstock. And there's 2 per string. So I'm confident, and I've already tested it, this approach will hold the strings much better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull the strings off of this and start replacing these string retainers. And hopefully I'll be able to keep the look that I was after, but with just a slightly different approach to how it's going to work. Each of the string retainers that I had installed on the headstock required 2 holes, one for the mounting screw and the other for an alignment pin. And I'm going to keep the hole for the mounting screws because I'm going to drill that all the way through, but I want to plug the holes that were for the alignment pins. So to do that, I just used some CA glue and the tip of a toothpick. Next, I sanded the surface of the headstock with some 400 grit sandpaper and applied a fresh coat of my polymerized tongue lap. Once that was done, I drilled the holes through the headstock to accommodate my top-loading string-through ferrules. Finally, I attached the Geiger string retainer to the back of the headstock. And remember those alignment pin holes on the front of the headstock that I plugged with a toothpick? Those can be concealed with a dab of artist oil paint. Well guys, that's as far as I can get in this episode because I only had 6 of these top-loading string-through ferrules, and I need to order 6 more so I can put them on the back of the headstock. And until they get here, I really can't do anything. So as always, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you'd like to help support the channel, visit my YouTube merch shelf down below or head over to eguitarplans.com. And at the very least, you can always click that thanks button down below and leave a little bit of a tip. Any bit helps. But until the next episode, as always, take care, stay safe, and I hope you'll be back for the next episode.